Welcome back to The Open Book. Today we're going to talk about domestic violence and then some. And today my friend Kirsten is here with me. Welcome, Kirsten.
Thank you for having me, Bridget.
How do you feel about being here to share your story today?
I'm actually excited because I haven't seen you in forever.
I know.
Yeah.
Friend.
I'm so happy to see you.
I know, me too. Yeah. So I want us to tell your story because I feel like I'm so connected to that. I think because as a child, I've seen it. Even kind of almost went through it and, saw those red flags. It's so important for younger girls or for anybody that's watching to hear your story and maybe you can help somebody.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah.
All right. Let's start with where were you born?
I was born in California. It's a small town called Camarillo. Well, I don't know how small it is now. It's gotten pretty big. Okay. But yeah, it's in Ventura County. So I grew up there. I'm going to age myself saying 1986 was when I was born.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived there until I was about 12. And then I moved out here.
Parents were married, divorced?
No, they were divorced.
Okay.
They divorced when I was about 2. So I don't have any memories of them actually being together.
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah, back then it was pretty normal for dads to only have kids every other weekend. Mm-hmm. So that's when I would see my dad every other weekend.
But he was in your life?
He was, yes.
Okay, and he was a good dad?
Great dad,
okay.
Yes.
And siblings? Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older brother and then a younger brother and sister.
Okay, and how far is the age?
My older brother, we're about 2 years apart.
Okay.
And then my younger brother and sister, they're twins. So
they're twins.
Yeah. So they're 8 years younger than me.
Wow. That's a big gap, age.
It's a big age gap.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so you have how many children?
I have 3.
Okay.
Yep. They're 5, 7, and 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
2 girls and a boy.
2 girls and a boy. Yeah.
Okay. Take me back to when you met your ex-husband.
I met my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually had moved back to California for college out of high school. And after graduating, I didn't know where I was going to live because it's so expensive in California. Yeah. So because I had already grown up out here a little bit, I moved back. And I was applying for jobs everywhere. And one of the jobs, I don't even remember how or when I applied for the specific job, but it was at a bigger tech company out here locally in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And I ended up getting hired and working for the CTO of the company. I was just his assistant, but his son worked in the company and his son just kind of worked in security at the time. But because he would always go to his dad's office, we would naturally talk and interact with one another.
Okay.
And then that grew into first a friendship and then eventually a relationship.
Whoa. How old were you?
24. Yes.
Okay, 24.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And did you have any relationships before that?
I did.
Boyfriends? Because you're cute, girl.
Oh, thank you.
So you did?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I had a long-term relationship. Well, long for being in your 20s. Yeah.
Okay.
We were together 5 years. So
wow.
Yeah. So I was 19 up until about, 23, something like that. So yeah. And that was in California before I moved down here.
Okay. So he's courting you, and then what happens then?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, I thought he was cute, very charming.
Okay.
We had sort of the same sense of humor, so a lot of playful banter, which made it awesome to be around him. Yeah, and just kind of charming. He had his own house, and I'm in my mid-20s, and thinking oh man, he's already got it together, and because I wasn't at that point in my life.
That's a good thing to actually say. You thought. He had it together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though he wasn't, just doing security for the company had a lot of room for growth. And he was very driven and smart. So I knew that he would eventually go somewhere, especially with his dad, being CTO of the company. You're thinking okay, he's, good guy. He was Marine, military war veteran. So very respectful, and there was just so many things.
So he had served already?
So when I met him, he had already been out of the service for some time.
And how long did he serve for?
He only served for 4 years.
Okay, but he did go to, he fought,
Yeah,
right?
he was one of the first group of Marines to actually go into the Middle East because he
Okay.
enlisted in August of 2001. So it was kind of height of conflict at that time. But again, this is many years before I met him. But that part of his history is important just because of the PTSD,
Yes.
which led into
Yes.
alcoholism and other things. Yeah.
So so you fall in love, when, the timeline, when did you start noticing that, whoa,
Yeah.
this is
Well,
weird?
looking back, there's probably some signs that were obvious in the beginning, like the drinking.
Okay, but you were young, but then
But I
when
was
you're
in my
young,
20s. Yeah, I'm drinking out of college. But
Everybody drinks when they're, well, majority, people that I know, they drink in their early 20s because they're, you know, you
Exactly.
just got out of college or like, especially, was he like a habitual drinker or was
Well, see,
it like?
I didn't see it all the time.
Okay.
So it wasn't like I was watching him drink every single day. But when he did drink, it was like excessive amounts, you know? And so those
okay.
things, but when he and I would have conversations about how much he was drinking, I would, you know, say like, well, you really drank a lot last night, something along
Yeah.
those lines. But then he would be like, okay, I won't drink that much. Almost like he had it under control, just like somebody in their 20s, like, okay, yeah, you're right, I did drink too much, I just won't drink that much next time. Not
I
actual
see.
signs of someone who has a problem, in my opinion.
So when he was drinking, he was not violent.
No, actually violence didn't happen until later in the relationship. So, and it was gradual, it was really slow.
Okay. So red flag number one, the drinking.
Red flag number one,
Okay.
drinking. Yes. I don't think that things got really bad until actually when I was pregnant with our second child. So
Really? So the first
yeah.
one, he was fine that whole time then?
Yeah, like
Okay.
we actually got along really well. We were living together, but we weren't married. He actually proposed to me while I was pregnant with our second child. And
okay.
yeah, I actually debated like, do I want to get married while I'm pregnant or after having the baby?
But you were still in bliss, happy
Yeah,
mode,
things
right?
were still good. I mean,
Okay.
there was still maybe some issues because when we got together, I got pregnant very early on in the relationship. And so on top of being in your 20s, trying to start your life, meeting somebody new, and then introducing a baby when you haven't been together very long creates some issues.
Yeah.
So but they weren't like abuse issues. They weren't like red flag issues.
Okay,
They were just typical trying to grow up while becoming a new parent.
Yeah.
And discover each other. Yeah.
And then, so how did it like turn into a fiasco?
Well, yeah, it
So
went
during
quick.
so when you were pregnant
So
with the
when I
second
was
one,
pregnant,
Okay.
yeah, his drinking got really out of control.
Was he still working?
He was still working.
Okay.
I actually, when I had found out that I was pregnant with baby number 2, we had decided that I would be a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
And so
Which a lot of families do.
Yeah. I mean, you think about paying someone else to raise your
Yeah.
kids, right? And if you
Yeah.
can try and squeeze it on the budget, yeah, stay at home. So that's what I did. And during the pregnancy, I was home the whole time. But that's when his drinking got worse. But I didn't really see it. Like all of a sudden, I would find bottles, just massive, like Costco-sized bottles, just empty in the garage.
Liquor.
Yeah, and it was vodka. Like that was his drink.
Okay.
But-
and you can't smell that really then. Vodka, you really can't smell it actually, right?
Yeah, well, I never did,
Yeah.
to be honest. But
Okay.
yeah, maybe other people, I don't know, or maybe I was around
Was
it
he
so much, I
functional
don't
when
know.
he was drinking?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were little things that he would do or say that you could tell that he was intoxicated, but it was not all the time. Like most of the time I would say that, yes, he was functioning. And you also get so used to seeing someone in the same state every single day that you don't even realize that they're impaired, if that makes sense.
Dang. So he could have been driving you guys around
Yeah.
intoxicated
gosh,
or like watching
wait until I
kids.
get to that point. Yeah, I'll have to tell you more about that later
God.
too. Yeah.
So he just started being aggressive?
Well, no, not originally. So I would say that looking back, the first thing that I would count as toward being violence, and not physical violence, but was little things like isolation. So he would start isolating me from friends and
Yes.
family.
That's what happens.
Yes.
Yes.
And I didn't even realize it until I was all alone.
What would he tell you?
It would be like, for example, if I got into a fight with a girlfriend of mine, he would exaggerate it in a fashion that would make me feel like you don't need this person around in your life, and sort of make me believe that you're right. I don't,
because
I
then
don't deserve
he
that.
just wants you all to himself, and then,
Right. It's about control,
Yeah,
really, is what
okay.
it's about. Yeah. And also a part of it too is that he doesn't want me talking to friends and family about our problems or what he's doing or me bad mouthing him drinking or whatever it is. So it's slowly isolating me from people.
And you just did whatever you didn't stop to think, because you're very
No.
like, you talk a lot, you're social, so you didn't stop to think.
It took me a while to get there.
So
I'll
you
be
wasn't
honest.
social before then?
No, and actually during the relationship, I got worse and worse. I became much more introverted and isolated. And just, I remember the first time when we separated, I remember the first time trying to spend $20. I was so nervous about spending money and just scared, to even do something. Like if I needed a pair of shoes because I actually needed them and it was cheap $20 shoes, I was scared to do even that. I felt like I had to call people to ask for permission to just live my life and spend my money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Drinking, isolation, and
and then it's slow, minor verbal abuse.
verbal.
Yeah.
Calling you names.
Calling me names. I gained a lot of weight with my pregnancies. So I remember one time I was taking a bath with the kids and he had taken a picture of it and I didn't really think much of it. It's a cute moment with me and the kids, even though we're, in the bath.
Yeah.
But later on, I can't remember how many days later or whatever, but we got in a fight and he ended up sending me the photograph telling me that I was disgusting and I'm a pig and all these things about, and
Wow.
you're hormonal still, you're having a baby and your body changes.
So he was just chipping away and breaking
chipping away. Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, he was just chipping away who you were as a person in hopes that you would just be submissive to whatever he could do to you.
Right.
And so the verbal, the emotional, the drinking, and then did you not realize that? Or were you did you tell your mom? Did you tell your family?
No. I mean, some things, yes. There were some things I didn't tell them because some of the things that I had shared with other people, it pushed them away from us because they didn't want to see me with somebody like that. So it I almost created the own isolation by sharing some of those details.
So you really had nowhere or nobody to tell this to because you couldn't tell them. In your own head, you were probably like, I can't tell them because I'm just going to make it worse.
Right. Or I feel ridiculous too.
Because you're staying.
Because I'm staying.
And everybody's first words is, just leave. Take
leave.
those kids and leave. But they don't really understand what it entails, how you would leave. You're all messed up.
Well, it's so black and white for people.
Yeah,
right?
It is.
Oh, there's abuse, you need to go.
Yeah, they don't understand
But there's also other things that are in it too. It's not 100% abuse, right? At least for me. Other relationships, maybe there is that. But for me, it wasn't 100% of the time he was mean to me. 100% of the time he was this or that. We had moments in the relationship that were wonderful, even in between those horrendous things that would take place. But also over time.
you had love for him too. And
I did.
And those babies.
Yes.
Yeah, and
keeping the kids together.
That plays a big part of it, especially because you grew up in a house, where your parents were divorced.
Right.
So you wanted to keep your family together.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it makes sense in your head.
And he was a good dad. Even though he would do things to me, he was a good dad.
So he was always a good dad to them?
He always was a good dad to them.
Okay.
Yeah. There's some things that maybe have taken place that may say something different because, for example, when we were actually going through the divorce, he didn't have an attorney. So at the end, he gave his own basically monologue because there was no attorney to question him.
Okay.
And one of the things that he had admitted is that he had drove drunk numerous times with the kids in the car while I was at work. Right. So when you think about it like that, okay, maybe he wasn't a great dad.
Well, yeah.
Right. But he was never mean or abusive to the children.
Okay, so he didn't abuse them. It was just physically. When did he start hitting you?
Yeah, so physical abuse happened while I was pregnant with our third child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. One of the moments that had taken place is when I was pregnant. I don't even remember what the fight had started over, to be honest with you, but it ended with him pointing guns at me, telling me that he was going to kill me and tell all our family. He took images of me laying down, saying that he wanted to take pictures of me, so I had to lay down as if I was dead. And so I actually still had the pictures during the divorce that I could show the psychiatrist during that time.
Jesus.
Yeah, and he tried to get me to pull the trigger on him. So
It was that toxic?
It was so bad. There was even an incident
Where were the babies?
They were in their room sleeping. So this is like late at night.
So he would
and I
only
was
act up
pregnant.
late at night? He would start, what would be his
the
like
most
thing?
part.
He would just start picking on you.
Yeah, well, so during that time, because of the alcohol drinking, he ended up getting fired from his job. So I ended up going back to work.
Okay.
So during that time, I'd be gone at work all day and he'd be drunk all day. So when I would come home, like we wouldn't really see much of each other because he didn't do much around the house. So like now I got to cook dinner, get the kids ready for bed, whatever they needed. And then I would put them into bed and then he and I would interact. So most of all these things would happen at night when they were asleep, which is good because then they didn't really see a whole lot.
Yeah, but they felt their mommy's pain.
Yeah, and there's times where they heard it or saw little things. Yeah.
I remember when me and you first met, I was like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. And, you know,
that's so sweet.
we interacted and I was like, I like your energy. And then, you know, you came and worked with us, right?
Yes.
That's when, little bit after that, I was like, something's wrong. Why is he knocking on our classroom door?
Oh, yeah.
You remember he would come and show up and then he would blow you up, call and call and call and call. And I was like, what's going on? And then I kind of like, you know, was watching because your interaction, you were like scared that you needed to answer that phone call. You had to answer the phone. You had to make sure that you answered it or you were just terrified.
Yes.
I could see it in your face. So I was like, damn, something's happening. Like, and I told Steph and I told her, I was like, something's happening. And she's like, I know. So we were just like we didn't know what to do, how to approach you and then you said you had to quit. So I was like, we just, like, what if we didn't help her? Like, and then maybe a couple months after that, you called me, remember? You called me and you were crying and it was that incident that you had to run with the kids out. That incident, I will never forget that phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you were going back to when you started working and you'd come home and you guys would start interacting and then he would hit on you, like full force hit on you?
That actually was a little bit later, to be honest with you. Okay. Most of that, so by the time it got really physical is when I left. So there wasn't as much physical abuse as what other people go through.
Okay.
And prior to that, though, it was always intimidation and it was always very much control. So like what you were talking about always answering my phone, like no matter where I went, what I did, he would want to know every 5 minutes where I was going, when I was going to be home. And it was just this constant guilt trip of, oh, you need to be home with your kids need you. And he would manipulate the children into like, when I would go to work, like, oh, the kids want you home so bad. Listen to them crying, you know? Wow. And so I wasn't really able to go out and do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that you always had somebody attached to your hip every time you had a child.
Yeah.
So, you know, do you think that, let's like go back and look at his PTSD. Do you think that plays a part of what, you know, was happening? Like he was battling with, I mean, what was his MOS?
He was a combat engineer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, a combat engineer is basically someone who walks around looking for landmines and collects them and then blows them up.
Okay.
And so when they're out there, you never know if you're going to apply too much pressure and it is going to blow up, or if you have a Humvee going over it. I mean, he's seen quite a few atrocities during that time. And again, it was also during one of the highest conflicts of what was going on in the Middle East at that time.
Okay.
So yeah, I do think a lot of what he was going through as far as his behavior towards me, alcohol, and he ended up doing additional drugs and things like that, which led into more abuse. I think all of that does stem from his PTSD.
Okay. Was he ever diagnosed with that or no?
Yes.
He was.
He actually now has 100% disability for having severe PTSD.
Well, you would think after all that.
After all that.
But that's the thing too. They have to go through all that. Like they just don't give it to you. No.
Yeah, no, it was a lot.
Yeah. So what was his family, like were they supportive? Did they know what was going on?
Yes and no. So I got really close with his parents and I loved his parents. Yes. But
they helped you, right?
They helped us so much. Yeah, they really did. And I'll never take that away from them. They really did help us through a lot of rough times. But the very first time that it got extremely physical, because there was little physical moments, but when it got really physical where there was marks on my body type of things, I remember he had thrown me through a shower and he had pinned me down and tried to strangle me. And I turned around and I was able to sock him, right in his area. Wow. And then I grabbed the kids and ran. And we ran. His parents only lived a couple doors down.
That's where you told me you ran to. That's the phone call I got from you.
Yes. And so I left all my car keys, everything at the house. He had smashed my cell phone into a million pieces, so I couldn't call for help. And I had asked them to use their phone so I could call for 911 and get him arrested. And they looked at me and they said, well, did you hit him? I was like, yes, I did. And they said, okay, well, now that you have also participated in it, you're both going to go to jail for domestic violence, and we won't be here to watch your kids and CPS. So they basically scared me into not calling the cops. And that was, so on top of going through that with him, I was like heartbroken by what they just did, because it literally told me that
they're letting it be okay. Yeah.
They're letting it be okay.
Yeah.
And so when I finally actually did decide to leave later on.
How many weeks or months after that did you leave?
It was months after, actually.
So you went back after that phone call, you still went back? Oh my gosh.
What happened was there was a series of events, but the long story short is I told him that he needed to move out, and then I would come back home with the kids so the kids and I could be back home, but he needed to go to rehab and he needed to go get sober and clean. And so he agreed. So the kids and I moved back in, but then he never left.
He never left.
And he never left.
So it just kept happening.
Yeah, and mind you, he had a gambling problem, so anytime we ever had money.
He had a lot of addictions.
A lot of addictions, yeah.
Wow. But he came from a good family, right?
Yeah, there's some past trauma there that they went through.
Okay.
I don't know if I should share any of that backstory, but yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
so
overall,
there's trauma.
There's childhood trauma.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's what they say about people with PTSD is that it's typical multiple traumas, right?
Traumas. And then you add on
war trauma,
and then you drink, and then you have kids, and it's just like a spiral. And probably because he quit or he got fired or whatever, so it turns into like a shit show.
Yeah.
So when you finally left, did you think about even going back?
No, not after that.
You just said this is it.
So honestly, the moment that did it is I had came home from work. He and I were fighting that day, and he had FaceTimed me when I was at work, and he was in the car with the kids, and he looked insanely drunk with the kids in the car. Shit. And so I'm freaking out, and so he calls me back shortly after. And he's now at home with the kids and they're safe. So I continue the rest of my work day, but on the way home, I buy a breathalyzer to prove that he had been drinking.
Oh.
That did not go over well.
You're not afraid of him then?
No, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. I mean...
Because some women, when they're afraid of their abusers, they're afraid of their husbands or boyfriends or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
So I would say, yes, I was scared, but I was also kind of toward the end of it. You kind of lose so much of self-worth that you just kind of like, that's it, I'm done.
Like, F it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going out with a bang.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So when I approached that to him, he smacked out of my hand, and then it got physically violent.
Wow.
And I specifically refused to fight back because if I was going to call the cops, I was not going to have any doubt.
Yes.
So whatever he did to me, I didn't fight back. I didn't struggle. I didn't do anything. And ultimately what did it is toward the end of the physical altercation, he's standing over me. So I'm laying on my back and he's standing over me, pressing against my chest with like all of his body weight. And I could just feel my lungs kind of like compressing. And Jordan, all the kids come running out. Tyler, he was 2, so he didn't really say much, but he started hitting him in the face saying, no, daddy, no, daddy, no, daddy. And then Avery actually started whacking him in from behind, trying to push him off of me. But Jordan's face is what did it for me. She stood there with this like horror movie face, just this sheer panic. Like she had no idea what was going on. This is daddy, who she was a daddy's girl, and he's hurting mommy, and I'll never forget her face. And that ultimately did it for me. And so...
It gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, it was... that's when I saw that it's not just hurting me. Like, I'm hurting my kids.
You finally got it.
You finally got it.
Snapped.
It did.
After you leave, and you finally start, healing, and you knew when you told me you left, I was like, praise God. I was so, and I even, like, that whole time, I was like praying for you and just like,
Thank you.
Jesus, you were always in the back of my head, and I always talked about you to my husband, and it's just something that he remembers you.
Really?
Because
I think I only met him like twice.
Yeah, because I would talk about you so often. And so, I just kept that in the back of my head. Like, I hope she got out, and I hope and
Thank you so much.
I knew. And then when I see you disappeared for a bit.
Yeah.
And I see you pop up on my Facebook. I was like, yes, look at her. And I was like, she's a realtor. And look at her. She's so pretty. Look at her face. And I was just like so ecstatic over it. So
You're going to make me cry.
well, I'm like, because you survived that. You bounced back. Yeah, it was traumatic. Yes, you did it. Yes, there was a lot of red flags. If you could give any advice to someone out there that is watching this in that situation right now, what would you say? With kids, without kids, what would you say to them?
That it's possible to leave and start a new life. And there's so many resources out there to help you get through that safely. Yeah. There really is. And I didn't know that at the time, going through all of that. I think had I known that, maybe I would have left sooner. But you feel trapped, and you feel like they're going to hunt you down. But there are resources, and there's people that are willing to be there for you to get through it.
Yeah. I totally believe that you can leave. It's better for the children to not be in that situation.
You have to think about what you're teaching them about what love is.
Exactly. And the boundaries of
how you need to be treated.
Yes.
How, like, my son should treat a woman.
Exactly.
How my girls need to be treated by a man.
So you did well, sister.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Oh. And that's a wrap.